I'm probably one of the luckiest athletes the world has ever seen to have experienced in meeting one of the greatest leaders of all time. Impossible to tell people what happened in our country in 6 weeks. From being a nation divided to becoming a nation of hope.
Nelson Mandela, and people talked about, if he's ever released from prison, it's going to be a difficult situation for the country. Talk a bit more about how he was viewed when you were growing up, and then, his impending release. What was the atmosphere like, when that was all sort of, unfolding, that he may be released from prison?
It was really tense. People were seeing civil warfare. They were stacking up on canned food and thinking that the country's going to go into a revolution. This was early 90s, 1991 especially. And when he was released from prison, people were fearing the worst. Here's a man that was in prison for 27 years. And surely, when he comes out of jail, there's going to be a sense of retribution. But it wasn't. When Mr. Mandela came out of prison, his first ever speech, which if you go and look at his first ever speech after he was released from Victor Verster prison, who's holding the microphone? Cyril Ramaphosa, a young vendor, was holding the microphone, and his speech was just incredible. His speech was about reconciliation, about building, about opportunities. His speech was a positive speech. He showed incredible leadership and vision. And but again, people were suspicious, especially the people in my community. Fast forward in my life, what was quite bizarre is our oldest son Jean was born whilst we were living in London, and Mr. Mandela phoned very early in the morning to congratulate us with the birth of Jean. And when I had a chance to speak to him, he asked me if he could be his godfather. It's like, incredible. He said, I want to give him a Xhosa name, Mkokeli. Mkokeli means leader. Mr. Mandela is Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Rolihlahla means troublemaker, because in his tradition, in his culture, they give you a name that they think is a premonition of, one day what you would be. It's beautiful, actually. And so he announced in South Africa that he's the godfather of Jean, and his name is Mkokele. In my wider family, it wasn't well received, Michael. It's just strange how apartheid has polarized people, and how Mr. Mandela, in his wisdom and in his heart of hearts, wanted to build a true rainbow nation when he came out of prison. Then, I met him for the first time when he became the first black president. And everybody that's watching your show should go and listen to his speech as the first black president of South Africa. I mean, words I'll never forget. The time for the healing of wounds has come. The time to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. The time to build is upon us. It's just, oftentimes you hear politicians and leaders that make these great speeches, but very seldom do you actually experience that they will follow through in what they've promised. Just an amazing journey that I've had from growing up as a kid in apartheid South Africa, not understanding what apartheid means. Not understanding how it feels like to live in a township, to be able to, in the morning, find a way to work, and in the evening, get back to where you live. So when I started these conversations and grew a brain, there was a yearning for me to give back. And that yearning came through just one person, and it was Mr. Mandela, and the way he spoke and the way he acted. And the first time he asked me to come and have tea with him when he was president, it was a couple of months after he became president. And there was a call from his assistant, Mary, who said that Mr. Mandela wants to have tea with you. And we arranged the time, and it was going to be in Pretoria in the Union buildings. I've told the story so many times, but every time I think back of it, it's insane. I was sitting outside his office, quite nervous, because why does he want to see me? What are we going to talk about? And then he came out in this booming voice. He said hello to me, and I said hello to him in English, and he kept on speaking to me in Afrikaans. He said to me, how are you? How are your parents? In my language. And then he did something just amazing. He took my hand, Michael, and he said, let's go and have tea. And he walked me into his office, and we sat and we we talked about apartheid, we talked about the boycotts, we talked about Robben Island, we talked about the Olympics. He just wanted to know a lot about me and where I come from and what my thinking is. And every now and then, funny now afterwards, is Mary would come and say to Mr. Mandela, the time is up, because there were presidents of countries waiting outside to to meet with him. And at the end, he said to me, "Thank you for your time. I really appreciate your time." It's like you go back and you think about these things right after people ask me, "So, what did you think? How did you feel?" I said, "Well, I felt that I was in the presence of a caring, real leader. I felt safe. Does it make sense? I felt like this is a genuine leader.
Sense.
You know, yeah, I've met people, and sometimes you can just realize this is just people talking for the sake of talking. But in his presence, it was never that. It was always you cannot explain to people how you feel once you've been in his presence and you've had a meaningful conversation. And it's a meaningful conversation, Michael. It's not just a conversation for the sake of having a chat. And it'll be good for me to have tea with the white captain of the Springboks. He wanted to have tea with me, and he wanted to understand what I was thinking. And I say this many times. I mean, I'm looking at one of the greatest athletes the world has ever seen. But I think I'm probably one of the luckiest athletes the world has ever seen to have experienced what I've experienced in meeting one of the greatest leaders of all time, and then going on to play in this rugby tournament that just impossible to tell people what happened in our country in 6 weeks. It's just, it's crazy, from being a nation divided to becoming a nation of hope over the course of 6 weeks, and how people's mindset changed, and how people, when Mr. Mandela walked onto the field at the final, there were 65,000 people, predominantly white people, predominantly Afrikaners, shouting Nelson, Nelson, Nelson. It's quite insane if you think about that. And it took me a while to realize. The next morning you wake up and you're going, what has just happened? The next month, and 26 years on, I am reminded regularly about that moment of hope, and the moment of we can, as a rainbow nation, do something extraordinary.
Yeah, I can imagine. I actually, had that same experience. I was so fortunate. One of my most amazing memories is being invited to meet Nelson Mandela in 1999. I was competing in South Africa and was invited to his residence. And I had that same feeling. I know exactly what you mean. You feel like, this icon, is really, truly interested in hearing what I have to say, which, like, it was an amazing experience for me. So I know exactly what you mean.